Love that recording in progress. Thank you, Ashley. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome. You are at the Rise and Thrive Campus Community Partnerships webinar. And today we are talking about facilitating meetings and partnerships. And yeah, so as a reminder, I have to do the spiel all the time because I wouldn't want anyone to forget, but Rise and Thrive is a project developed through funding from the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund Act, which ultimately is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES is what it's known as. And OCI, the Ohio College Initiative, who hosts these series of webinars, which are free, we are housed at Prevention Action Alliance, and PAA is a partner in this project with the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Prevention First, the Ohio Program for Campus Safety and Mental Health, and the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery. So these webinars are designed and developed to promote campuses and communities working together and provide the opportunity to engage with state and national experts, like the one we have here today, on topics that promote campus and community partnerships and enhance student wellness. Like I said, all webinars are free. We do offer CEs for these webinars. Webinar recordings will be posted on the OCI webpage, and you can find all past recordings from webinars on that webpage as well to watch at your convenience. So now I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Bob Hosea. Did I say your name correct? Oh, great. I've been practicing. Is our guest speaker today. He currently serves as the Civil Alternative Dispute Resolution Branch Chief with the Multi-Door Dispute Resolution Division of the District of Columbia Superior Court. That sounds very intriguing. He has a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution with an emphasis on educational and organizational dispute resolution and management systems, designs and implementation. And I will stop there, Dr. Hosea, and I will let you take it away from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana and Ashley. Thank you both for inviting me to do this presentation for you all. I'm going to take just a second here to shift over and get my PowerPoint up and running so that you all can see this. There we go. Okay, now we're just going to back it up 1 second here. All right, so my preference is always for people to call me Bob, so please, this is a very informal conversation. I'm a pretty informal person when it comes to working with people, so I do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you all today. Part of my background is that I spent 7 or 8 years running a mediation service in a university setting geared towards assisting students and university staff in resolving conflicts. So I worked with the Division of Student Affairs and thoroughly enjoyed working in the university setting. And so I enjoy this chance to come and talk with many of you all who are out of the university setting. A wonderful place to work. A little bit about my background, just for your own awareness. The work that we do in our field of conflict resolution utilizes a lot of different processes, all centered around helping parties communicate better, problem solve, and develop solutions and settlements to problems and issues of concern. We have a lot of different tools. Principally right now, the work I do for the court system is I manage a branch for our mediation program. And while we do offer other services, mediation is primarily the service we offer And we do about 5,000 mediations a year. So, but along with the processes we use, mediation, arbitration, restorative justice, facilitation is one of the processes we use quite a bit. There's a process called facilitative dialogue where we can help parties come together and talk through issues using a neutral to facilitate that conversation. So while facilitation can be used in the conflict resolution setting, facilitation is principally used in the meeting setting, to hold meetings, to allow meetings to take place in a much more manageable, respectful, civil environment. And the idea today about facilitation for you all's purposes is around the idea of building relationships with your community members and your campus folks, utilizing meeting skills and strategies. And so we'll get into a little bit here about the different facilitation skills and strategies that can help you as you begin to set up meetings with community members and develop those relationships. So I have offered you all a PDF of the training, and I want to take just a minute and touch base on that PDF that you have. The way that I've designed this training is really what you have and what you'll see in the PowerPoint slides is a checklist. When the idea with the checklist is that I've tried to cover various skills and strategies and techniques that I think offer you a lot of options in your pre-meeting, your mediating, your pre-meeting, your meeting management during the meeting, and your post-meeting wrap-up efforts. And I think using this PDF as a checklist will help you to ensure that you haven't missed any steps along the way. Because of the limited duration of this presentation, the interest is not to drill down into any particular skills, but rather to just touch on these different ideas and skills that can be used. At the end of the PDF, I offer a resource page, and the 3 books that I mentioned there are books that I pull from for both this presentation and when I do facilitation work myself. And so those books will be very handy for you to learn more deeply about the different skills that you can utilize for facilitating. So with that in mind, I'm going to just take one more minute here and talk about, as I check my slides here and my time, I want to just kind of touch base about the importance of this particular training. Why facilitation? In doing my research and then my own experience coming from the university setting, I know that road around the university or college campus can be a bit of a barrier between the campus and the community at times. It's not unusual to hear about the town and gown conflicts that occur. This is kind of a historical event that can happen. That road around the campus, whether it's University Avenue or College Boulevard or whatever it might be, can serve as a barrier and a buffer in the community and the campus coming together. So the idea of the campus reaching out to the community to begin building, and I know this is an ongoing process and has been, building relationships with the community is a wonderful opportunity to establish some very wonderful services for the campus population and primarily students. in my own experience, awareness of university conflict resolution services and university mental health services, medical services that cater not only to the campus population, but also to the community around it are wonderful endeavors. So building those campus community relationships to support these types of endeavors is wonderful. Universities that I've worked at before or attended had retail discount service cards for students, and where the university and the retail community gotten together and developed a program so students would have a discount card where they could go out to the different retail establishments in the community and get a 10% discount. So we're aware that these campus community relationships have existed and continue to exist today. The important piece is that we want to continue building these, and the right way to do it. Because these relationships are so very important and can have long-term benefits, we want to be able to start out creating these relationships the right way. And what I would suggest to you is a right way to do it is collaborative meetings where the campus and the community come together and dialogue about how they can utilize each other's resources to serve the students and the community in general. So the effort for building relationships is centered around cooperation and trust building. Trust building is hard, you all know that. So the idea of a facilitated meeting allows you as the meeting leader or meeting organization to better manage the meeting objectives and goals and experience and ongoing opportunities that can come from that meeting. Facilitation offers opportunities for holding respectful and civil sessions where everybody can be heard, all ideas can be collected, and you can move through a meeting building consensus around ideas and conclude with action plans or agreements to move forward with some new ideas. So facilitation can be the skill that can help make a difference in those meetings. I'm sure some of you already have experience in facilitation. Some of you may have some awareness of facilitation and the skills, and others, you may not know much about it. So I've designed this training really to appeal to all of you in the hopes that as a checklist, it's going to serve you to at least give you some ideas of what you can do for facilitating sessions in support of these campus community relationship building meetings. So with that, we're going to move forward into the training. Okay, so some of the goals, and just kind of quickly, some of the goals that we are going to talk about is understanding the role of facilitation and the act of facilitating. And we're going to talk about techniques to enhance the effectiveness of meetings. And finally, consider facilitation as a strategy for developing collaborative relationships with your community partners for enhancing student services or university services. I do welcome questions. So if, as we move through this, please, you're welcome to put your questions into the various resources, the Q&A or the chat box. And I believe Ashley will let me know if we have questions. Because of limited time, I may have to move through this a little quicker, and we may have to pick up some of those questions at the end. But either way, I really appreciate your questions and look forward to responding. So just quickly, what is facilitation? So as I note here, Schwartz identified it as a process, and that's one of the genuine solid pieces about facilitation. It is a process. We know that typically we can schedule spur of the moment meetings, and we kind of have an idea of what we want to do, but we really don't have a process in mind or an end game. And the value to facilitation is that it causes us to have to stop and think about what do we want to do and follow a process. In this process, we use an accepted person, and the accepted person means that whoever is going to be facilitating or leading this meeting has some knowledge about the purpose and the benefits of this meeting, has some knowledge about the stakeholders that are coming to this meeting. This is someone that has some knowledge about how to manage this meeting and move it towards its goals and objectives. So an assisted person or an accepted person assists the group to improve operations of the meeting and its effectiveness. So those are kind of the keys to why we want to use a facilitated process rather than just jumping into a meeting and trying to move it through kind of ad hoc. Some of the advantages to facilitation: it makes group interactions easier because you have a designated person that's leading it. Encourages unique solutions because we have a process for brainstorming ideas and encouraging participation. It's goal focused, and it leaves participants feeling a sense of the process has been followed. What is a facilitator? So fairly simply, the facilitator provides structure. It's someone who understands the nature of facilitating and has a structure in mind for interacting with the various parties or participants or stakeholders in the meeting, and effectively moving it through, allowing it to function to develop quality decision-making. Generally, a facilitator is impartial, not always. We do have leader facilitators. We have subject matter expert facilitators. But when we say that they're impartial, they're coming to this without an end solution in mind. They're coming to this with an idea of openness and really wanting to draw upon all participants, in this case, the community and the college or the university stakeholders, to really develop solutions and outcomes that are in the best interest of everybody. So the facilitator guides decision-making and manages participant interactions, and that's key. We want to make sure that at the end of the meeting, all participants feel that if they had ideas, they were able to share them, they were taken seriously, and their ideas were considered as part of the solutions. I note here some of the advantages here for the facilitator. Helps people move through a process together. Facilitators typically have awareness of a range of skills and methods. Facilitators know that they want to try to get everybody involved, so they try to bring the best out in everybody to work together, and they know they're trying to work within an interactive environment. The role of the facilitator, in my little cartoon icon here, he is multitasking his heart out, and a facilitator does just that. A facilitator's role is, as I show here, these are some of the things the facilitator is doing all at one time. Now you may say, well, a facilitator can be a lot like someone leading a meeting, and it's very true. Someone leading a meeting can be using facilitative skills. And there's a lot of different facilitative skills to use. Facilitators help people manage uncertainty. And there are times in decision-making processes where things can feel uncertain, and people might feel a little uncertain about where this is going. And the facilitator knows and is comfortable in uncertain conversations, but is able to lead people through it because they are goal-oriented. They bring calm to challenging conversations. They have conversational management skills for helping people to be able to bring out or surface concerns and talk through them in a respectful and civil manner. The facilitator role is to be supportive and guide participants through the conversation. Energizing the session is extremely important for the facilitator. facilitator becomes aware that the conversation's dragging, and it's on the facilitator to come up with some new ideas or new questions to spur energy into that conversation and get it going again, or shift tracks to get us back moving again. And the facilitator's role is also to help surface difficult conversations that others might be trying to skirt because they're difficult in nature. The role of a facilitator is to be an active listener. And that in itself, being that active and reflective listener, that takes a lot of work. And so that is an important skill for the facilitator. So we're going to cover 3 areas. The pre-meeting planning. We're going to talk about the actual meeting management itself when the meeting is taking place, and then skills and strategies post-mediation. What do you want to think about after the meeting to kind of tie up things and keep it on track? So your pre-meeting planning, one of the things I like to suggest to you that you want to think about is the reason for the meeting. In advance of putting your agenda together, why do you want to have this meeting? And this can even be a meeting which is one-on-one. When I do performance review meetings or performance planning meetings with my staff, I take a few minutes and just jot some notes down for myself. Because in the heat or the heart of a conversation and a meeting, sometimes it's easy to get sidetracked. So I want to try to make a few notes about why am I meeting with this person? What's the goal? What are the purposes? So I just note here a couple of ideas. Your purposes could be solving a problem, sharing an interest. Maybe the university is bringing the community in to talk about, we want to develop, we have an interest in creating better housing services for our off-campus students. And so we want to create a partnership with ownership of off-campus apartment buildings and homes. So that's an interest you might want to share. Maybe the purpose of the meeting is to share information or make a decision. And then your goals can include things like developing an agreement. You want to generate options or getting a status update from your stakeholders. Maybe the goal is to raise or coordinate awareness about an event coming up or a service you all want to kick off. So you use this information as ultimately for your agenda. 2 other things to think about in your pre-planning stage. The topics or ideas for the meeting. Sometimes we don't always think this through, and it's very important. You're going to want to get your agenda out to the parties in advance. And on the agenda, you want to give them an idea of the topics or ideas for the meeting so they can do a little advanced research. So you need in your early stages when creating your agenda, what information are you going to need or that is necessary for this conversation and this meeting to occur? And you may find that you yourself have to do some initial research. And it may be research you wind up sharing with the stakeholders in the meeting. Topics can also be ideas to be discussed. And you'll see in the agenda where we're going to include these. So a little advanced thinking on the topics or ideas is very healthy. Another thing to think about in your pre-planning stage is, where will the meeting be held? Is it a physical location on campus in the community? Or is it virtual, like so many of us have been doing the last 2 years? And if it's virtual, what kind of platform are we going to use? Is it something that everybody will have access to? When will the meeting be held? Is it timely? Do we need to have this meeting soon? Or is it dependent on something else? Maybe you have an off-campus housing fair coming up in a couple of weeks. So you want to do this meeting after the off-campus housing fair. So it's dependent on other events. So you want to kind of plan that out. And then finally, how will the meeting be implemented? Is it a formal meeting with a lot of structure? Is there a lot of key decision makers that are going to be there? Or is it more informal around maybe information sharing, and it's not going to be so procedurally structured? That makes a difference in what your agenda would look like. So these are just some ideas for you to think about. So then in the pre-planning stage, we want to create our agenda. So I give you some ideas here on things you need to think about. And it's very easy to create an agenda and forget about one or two of these. But these are significant to an agenda because when you send it out to people in advance, it's giving them a sense of awareness and confidence in the meeting they're going to be attending. So you want to identify the priorities, what needs to be covered during the meeting. And we go back to those topics and ideas, goals and objectives. Goals, what do we need to accomplish? What are we looking for at the end of this meeting? As part of maybe ongoing meetings, but what is the initial goals for the end of this first meeting? Participants, who needs to attend to make it successful? And typically that's key decision makers. And a lot of times we can forget to get the right people in the room until we're starting to come up with agreements. And someone says, wait a minute, forgot to bring the owner of the apartment complex, because as the manager, I can't make a final decision. So we need to make sure we invite the key people. Timing, how much time will you spend on each topic and how much time will you need for the meeting? So you kind of want to timeline out your meeting and show that on your agenda. It gives people the reassurance that you're not going to waste their time, that you're bringing them to this meeting, you're very goal focused, and you put some time and thought into having a quality meeting. Ground rules. As we'll talk about a little later, ground rules can be very important. I know many of you have been in meetings before where it became unruly or people were disrespectful or behaved inappropriately, even pulling a cell phone out and taking a call in the middle of a meeting or having side conversations. So putting a few ground rules down on your agenda, or at least noting on the agenda that there will be some ground rules discussed, gives people a heads up that this meeting is going to be respectful. And finally, the date, time, and place of where the meeting will be. So these are some important pieces to keep in mind when you develop your agreement or your agenda. Finally, a couple of pieces to keep in mind, those potential problems that might arise when you after you send that agenda out. You don't want to realize that you wrote your objectives in a manner that they're just not really clear. And so you want to take time to clarify your objectives and your goals that are on the agenda so people have an awareness of really what your ambition is for this meeting. Group size can tell you a lot about how big a forum you need for this and maybe how much structure you need for it. So you want to make sure you have an awareness of just how many people are to be invited or will ultimately come. Agenda size and complexity. Depending upon the nature of your meetings, agenda size can be important. If you've already decided that your get-togethers will be over the course of a couple meetings, you might not need to put everything for this project on the first agenda. You might want to break it out over a couple of different meetings. And complexity, you want to keep it clear so that you're not having to field phone calls from people who just received your agenda and they're asking lots of questions. So try to keep it simple. Finally, and something we've already hit on, making sure that you have the key participants and decision makers coming to your meeting if your intentions are to develop agreements or understandings with people. Okay, so we get to the we've got our agenda, we've done all the pre-planning. It's the day of the meeting. As a facilitator or as a leader of a meeting, and you want to use facilitation skills, these are some strategies you want to think about in advance of your meeting and then use these during the meeting. Know the participants and consider their expectations. Who's going to be coming? So who, are these, if it's a housing partners meeting, you want to know, are these the managers of the apartments or are these decision makers, maybe ownership that's coming that'll be able to create agreements with you. So know your participants and then consider their expectations. what might they want out of your partnership in regards to the theme or topic of this meeting? And so kind of already having your idea, having your mind, what their expectations might be and plan for that so that you can help meet their expectations as well as them meeting your expectations. As I talked about earlier, distribute and follow the meeting agenda. The more you stick to that agenda, the more successful your meeting is going to be. Manage time and off-topic conversations. Manage time is very important because we want, as I said earlier, we want people to know that we value them and their cooperation. And we don't want to run long, and we don't want them thinking that we're wasting their time, because it's likely that they may decide not to participate in any further partnerships or meetings with us. And off-topic conversations. As a facilitator, you'll get people wanting to discuss different topics in the course of a conversation. And you're having to kind of move through those conversations, trying to help people decide, is this topic really of relevance in the moment's discussion or not? And if it's off topic, it may be something that you courteously suggest to someone, is that something we can put in our parking lot for later on in the meeting and come back to it if we don't get to it. So we kind of want to manage those off-topic conversations. Encourage participation by all attendees. And that's simply to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk, to share their ideas. Sometimes there's going to be people that are not going to say anything, and that's their intention. They don't have anything to share. And it's okay. The important piece for a facilitator is to have constant eye contact with the different participants, watch their body language. And if you get a sense they might want to ask a question, you might just say, listen, I'm just wondering, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share? We don't want to call on people unexpectedly, but if you get a sense that they might want to share something and there's a little reluctancy, ask in a very courteous way if they would have something they'd like to share. Record important points that are taking place. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment here. It's part of your note-taking for future reference with your meetings. Manage interruptions. Eruptions can occur from people walking in the door late to phone abusers, whether they're taking email or phone calls, or maybe two people having a side conversation and it's interrupting. Typically, these are much more intrusive and smaller group meetings. So your ground rules around these can be in your agenda, just noting that please, during the meeting, if you would hold all calls and phone use, and we would appreciate, side conversations, if you can just step outside, we'd appreciate that so you don't disrupt the conversation in session. Discuss now, so as we're getting to the end of our meeting, one thing you want to think about is making sure that before you conclude the session, we talk about next steps. Are we going to have another meeting? Well, let's talk about it during the session. Would they like to come back for another meeting? If so, what topics would they want to come and cover? What expectations do they have for the next meeting? Are there any actions that particular people have agreed to do over the course of the next period of time before the next meeting that need to be completed? So we want to discuss that, make sure everybody knows what their role and responsibilities are. And then we want to end on time. We want people, again, to know that we respect their time. If you're running a little late, just simply asking the group, is this conversation important enough to you that you want to run on another 5 or 10 or 15 minutes? Or should we conclude now with the expectation of coming back and picking up where we left off? This is just a way of showing everybody that you respect their time. During the meeting, recording important points, and you all are aware of these things, so I don't need to drill down on this very much, other than just to say that as a facilitator, you are multitasking, and for you to try to take time to make notes, it's really challenging. So in this session here, Ashley was gracious enough to kind of field questions for me. And that's a real help. It allows me to focus on the presentation and answer questions as they come up. So having a partner to assist you who might either use chart paper or just take notes on a pad, or maybe use a laptop to take notes. That's very helpful. And then when recording notes, particularly if it's on chart paper where other folks can see it, but even if it's notes that you're going to use for recording the session and distributing, if you're not going to use participants' full comments, which sometimes can be very hard to do, you want to paraphrase. So when you can, use the participant's full statement, and when you can't, ask the party if you can paraphrase and get clarification. Usually when I'm working on a chart board, I'll ask somebody, listen, this is what I heard you say. Can I summarize it to mean this? And if they're comfortable with that, then I'll write it on the chart paper. We don't want to start publicizing someone else's comment if it's not what they wanted that comment to represent. So it's very important that we use the participants' wording or their choice of wording. So a little bit about recording important points. Generating input engagement. So in the course of a facilitated meeting where I facilitated before, you can get through an introduction period and people have started talking, but then people are at a place where they're not sure if they want to start putting too much more information out there at this point, and it can get a little quiet. So how does the facilitator keep that engagement going? So you want to make sure everybody feels comfortable about participating. And certainly your ground rules will provide a nice shelter for people to feel safe and put things out there when otherwise they might be a little skittish about it because it's their opinion and they might think or know that someone else is going to have an opinion which is somewhat different. So creating a very civil and respectful environment, and having some ground rules about raising your hand maybe for when you want to speak, if it's a larger group or even a smaller group, instead of just blurting it out. Not cross-talking when someone else is speaking, even conversations where you want to control the type of language that people are expressing, refraining from certain type of dialogue or languaging. So these are all pieces that help people feel safer in a group conversation and are more likely to participate and engage. So you want to encourage all participants to offer ideas. And if you have some folks that have not spoken out in the conversation, you might mention that, I'm aware that some of you have not have taken the opportunity to share your thoughts. And I certainly want to encourage you to. Is there any reason why any of you might not want to express your feelings? Let's kind of find out, is there some barrier that's occurring where they don't feel safe enough to share their thoughts? Let's filter that out and work through that so everybody can feel safe to participate. Encourage all participants to offer ideas. And when we're generating options, we don't want to eliminate any options. So all options are welcome. No matter how crazy it might sound to me, to somebody else, that option might make great sense. So the facilitator's job is to try to encourage people to put as many options out there for conversation. And that follows along with supporting everyone's idea. When, as a facilitator, when someone is sharing a thought with you, your demeanor can make a difference in whether that person feels comfortable sharing their thoughts with you. So smiling, having an open body language and an encouraging posture lets people feel safe and they want to share their ideas. And then certainly as they're sharing their idea, you don't want to interrupt. And when they finish their idea, You want to maybe summarize or paraphrase it. And you certainly never want to evaluate or measure that comment in any way. So that's a couple of suggestions on how to encourage and maintain participants' engagement. Now, the structured meeting process. This is just an example of what a structured meeting process might look like. You don't have to use all of these. You can pick and choose which of these might be useful. The larger the meeting, the more complex the meeting topic is, I'm more likely to try to use all 8 of these steps. Certainly identification of issues, the facilitator in the beginning of the meeting after introductions are done and we're starting the meeting, I want as a facilitator or the meeting leader to share with everybody, what are the issues? Why are we here? What's the purpose and the goals? Where are we going with this? And then information immersion stage. The idea that now we want, as a facilitator, we want to just get everybody talking about this idea of creating an off-campus housing partnership for university students to rent housing. And so let's talk about what are the various rental services. What kinds of problems are they running into with students in housing? The university, what kinds of problems or issues are they running into with university student housing? Let's get all of this information out through this initial conversation. We want everybody to get a sense of what everybody else knows. As they say, to move into next steps, we want everybody to be on the same page. So in order for everybody to be on the same page, we have to get all of the different stakeholders to share as much as they can so that everybody understands everybody's awareness and viewpoints. Once we've worked through the information immersion stage, the facilitator has a pretty good sense now we're at a place where we can move into processing this information. We've got to start figuring out of all this information we've become aware of, what's going to help us. So we use comparisons and contrast as a way of processing information. So the facilitator is going to start talking about all the things we've written down on our chart paper from our information immersion conversation. And we're going to start trying to figure out of this information, what identifies the current state of housing for students on and off campus. And then what information identifies the desired state of the current housing on and off campus. And if that didn't come up, let's talk about it now. What is the desired state? What do we want the desired state to look like? We might filter our information we've collected in terms of strengths and weaknesses of a program, or advantages or disadvantages. But somehow we need to start filtering the information to start moving it to what are we really interested in, where do we want to go? Then we start looking at areas of common interest or agreement between, if again, using my off-campus student housing example, what might be the areas of common interest that both the off-campus landlords and the campus university administrators see in common? What are some ideas that they could agree to? And from there, we can start generating options around achieving these interests or these different ideas that we're seeing. And brainstorming is one of the words we use for option generation, what it might look like. Then we move into option selection and agreement development. Now, depending upon the nature of the topic and the size of the meeting, this may all not occur in your first meeting. So this might occur in a second or third meeting. Nevertheless, at some point, this is where you want to get in your conversation, where you're getting to a place where everybody's in agreement on the options, and those options can then be converted into an actual agreement. Once we've created the agreement, we're at a place to have some further discussion. And so for the facilitator asking those questions, how do you all feel about the agreement as we've created it? Any pros and cons, anything we need to look at further? We don't want to end this process with people going home and suddenly realizing, oh, we should have discussed this or that. At least we would try to eliminate that or minimize that opportunity. And then after further discussion, it's an action plan, figuring out, okay, this agreement, how will we develop it? How will we implement it? And how will we evaluate it to see how good it is, how it's working, not just for the people off campus, but the students and for the university administration as well. So that's a little bit about a structured process. Take just a minute here and just talk about, just checking our time for us. Take a minute and just talk about the interpersonal skills that we need. And most of you, particularly coming out of the university setting, you're well familiar with these concepts of active and reflective listening. Active listening is your summarizing. When you've heard somebody speak and share something, active listening is where it's your body posture and your communication style. So your body posture showing that you're opening to listening, and your head nodding, encouraging that you're hearing what they're saying, and your receptivity to what they're sharing with you. And then your reflective listening is the paraphrasing and summarizing what someone has said to make sure that you're clear on their intent of what they said. The questioning piece. Again, you all are quite familiar with open-ended questions, which are your very broad questions. Those are the questions you use to start the session. Very broad. You're trying to get people just to talk about everything they know about this topic. So they're very broad, very general. Whereas your closed-ended questions are very specific and direct. They're questions where people are confirming yes or no to something as a way of just finalizing awareness of information. And then finally, the probing questions. Those are your deep dive and curious questions. After you've started with your opening questions and you've gotten lots of general information, you may want to drill down on some of those topics. And so we use probing questions where, so as a facilitator, I might say, you mentioned this particular topic, I'm curious. Can you tell me more specifically about your awareness of this area? So probing questions. And dispute management is very important. As I said earlier, invariably, when we're in these meetings, there is going to be some disagreements. So anticipate it. Somebody's going to express something at some point, particularly if they're comfortable in doing it. And that means that you created a safe environment. And so how will you manage disagreements? And so what I suggest to you is you want to highlight the points of agreement between two folks that are disagreeing. There's going to be some snippets or pieces that are agreeable with both parties. And so you want to highlight the things that they have in common. And you want to encourage them to build on each other's ideas. And one way I do that is the points of disagreement. I'll say, do you mind for the moment if we take these points of disagreement and put them in the parking lot? And we'll come back to these. If we don't cover them later on, we will come back to these. 9 out of 10 chances are good that we will cover those later on, or in the course of our conversation as we move through this, they're going to wind up agreeing to things initially that they disagreed to. And it's all around this idea of helping people build on each other's ideas. So just kind of some thoughts around some skills for managing the dialogue during the meeting. Post-mediation meeting considerations. So in wrapping up here, this is one of the last slides. Very important. A lot of times we hold meetings and it's over and done with, and we kind of forget about tying up loose ends. But the follow-up is very important. So you want to make sure that people know that the time and energy they have invested in this meeting was not wasted. So by providing participants with a follow-up email or maybe a follow-up phone call is reassuring to the stakeholders that they're moving in the right direction. They can have confidence in you, they'll appreciate your cooperation, and you're building trust with them. So a couple of things you can do. You had your partner creating notes or minutes during the meeting. So you can take those notes or minutes and you can send those out in an email to all the parties. And some of those notes and minutes can include action items. Maybe some of the different folks agreed to do some research or agreed to check in with other community members about some items. So there's some action items. So the follow-up email might include those action items as a reminder. The follow-up email can also identify meeting outcomes in a very positive, optimistic way. You can note the things that were accomplished in the meeting, even if it wasn't agreements, it was that we got through the information immersion stage and we're now ready to move on in our next meeting. So just acknowledging the things that did get accomplished and what next steps might need to occur. So with that, I just want to note again that these three resources that I show here are resources that I've used for this check sheet PDF that I provided you. There are lots of resources out there. These are just three that I can suggest to you. And typically people at the end of these sessions will say to you, can you suggest some ideas? So I wanted to do that for you. So I'm going to stop here and see if Ashley has some questions that have come in. And then we will also take the last few minutes here, and maybe you all can let me know how much time is left, that we could have a little conversation around this point. I'll stop there, and Ashley, if you or Juliana want to jump in.
Sure. Bob, there actually is a question in the Q&A, and
Okay.
it says, do you have any tips for structuring a meeting where the problem solving is more one-sided? For example, you want someone to stop doing a non-evidence-based strategy and do a different one. These conversations can be hard because usually the other party has no issue with what they're doing / no motivation to change.
Very good question. Yes. As the question I think alluded to, you're trying to get somebody to change their behaviors or change a strategy. One suggestion, and this might be more of a conflictual dialogue, where we are trying to get someone to become aware of something that they might not otherwise have awareness of. And so there's some different ways of doing this. One suggestion is that someone says, well, there's one way of, this is the way I want to do this. And so I might say, have you investigated other options for doing this? With my team, my staff, they came to me with just one strategy. I would say, what are other possible options? Before we make a decision, let's just make sure we've exhausted what other ways of doing this are there. And so that puts the responsibility on the other person to kind of look at some other possibilities as part of that conversation. And it may be that you're sharing with them what some of these other ideas are, and then walking through those different strategies with the person so that they can kind of put that pair of pants on and try them on and see how they feel, as opposed to the pair of pants that they're trying to pursue or put forth, so to speak. So that would be two suggestions. Certainly let me know if that's not sufficient, and we can talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you, Bob. And it's 2:30, so we have about 30 minutes left. And really, let's open it up to the floor for questions. If you wanted to be unmuted, Ashley, I think she can accommodate that.
Yes, you can just do the raise your hand feature.
And what I can do to start off the conversation, let me say two things. One, I know I kind of went through the presentation quickly and not knowing exactly how much time we had. We can certainly go back and I can drill down a little bit on some of those topics if you have an interest, as well as I would be very interested in hearing from some of you all that might be in the midst of already having created some community campus relationships around services, for example, or resources, shared resources. Maybe some of you are in the midst of thinking about this right now, or developing a plan to do it. Maybe some of you have already had a meeting. I would be interested in kind of hearing, how did that meeting go? And did any of these skills or strategies, did you use any of these, or could they have been beneficial? So it's kind of getting some feedback from you all about how you see the facilitative resources helping you, or had they helped you, or how they could help you. Okay, and another question I'll put out there then also is, do any of you see an impediment? Well, let me ask it differently. Regarding facilitative skill sets, do you see either any benefits specific to you for using some of these ideas, or are there maybe some impediments that you anticipate if you were to use some of these ideas?
Oops. Okay, so here's a Q&A, or a question actually. Sometimes coalitions and task force groups that meet regularly for a long time, example monthly, lose momentum. People stop showing up, etc. Any tips? That's a good question.
It is a good question. And I would suggest that you're losing interest and that's probably pretty obvious, but where I'm going with it is there's some communication barriers that are taking place. Either the attendees or participants aren't sharing with you maybe some challenges that they're experiencing, which is causing them to either lose interest or not being able to attend for some reason, or maybe there's something going on in the meeting itself, or the way the meeting is being handled, that's creating a barrier. So you might want to use a survey or an evaluation strategy, reaching out to the people to elicit from them, how are they appreciating this task force, the operation of the task force? Are they getting something out of it? Why or why not? And can they share with you any challenges that they as participants or stakeholders are experiencing in the course of this task force? It's not unusual for organizationally driven committees or task force or work groups can sputter at times, and allowing people that confidential way of sharing with you what the barriers are to their interest in continuing can help you understand it. You may wind up having a task force meeting specifically around what you learned from your evaluation to get people back on board again. And by alleviating some of the concerns that are creating this disengagement, you can get people motivated again. So I put that out there as a thought. Share more around your specific concern if that doesn't address it sufficiently.
Thank you, Bob. And I actually, while you were talking, I had a thought. Is there something that you can implement or do to be proactive before people start losing interest, or kind of, to well, basically be proactive so these issues don't come up as frequently and maybe are more challenging to deal with them while they're happening?
It's a very good point, Juliana. All communication, human communication, is based in trust and respect. And cooperation is based in trust and respect. Two key words. And all of our work groups, all of our committees, task force, it's all based on trust. So what I use and what I suggest to people is, again, at the end of your meetings, send out a quick little questionnaire, a little evaluation or survey. Let people respond after each session, just telling you what worked, asking the question. In our meeting yesterday, what worked? What didn't work? What can we do better? What can we change? 4 simple questions. And you are going to elicit or unearth interesting things that you probably weren't aware that were barriers or becoming barriers. So this proactive strategy that Juliana is mentioning, it's an excellent idea. And so I have sat on committees before where we use something like this afterwards. Of course, a lot of people that I work with are conflict resolvers. So this is something that we use to stay aware, to keep the communication open. It's the meta message through surveys and evaluations. The meta message to people, the message is, we care about you. We respect your time and your relationship. Tell us what we're doing right and wrong so that we can tweak our processes, that when we're together again, they work even better for you. And people like that. They appreciate that. So hopefully that's a strategy that I think has worked well for me and in groups that I've been with. And I highly encourage it.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. That being said, with the surveys at the end of meetings, no matter how brief they are, I have found, in addition to what you suggested, that you give people time during the meeting to fill out those evaluations. That way you still kind of have like a captive audience in a way. So
I fully agree.
So there is a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to read it or I can read it out loud. So I'm assuming everybody has read it, but basically Kathleen says she's working on a grant on addressing sexual assault on campus, and facilitated meetings have been really important as we bring together women's, gender, and resource peer advocates, counseling, Title IX, and police. Wow, that's a great collaboration. Important to get all information out on the table, get clear perspectives before we identify and implement change plans.
Very interesting. And Kathleen, I appreciate you sharing that. And one thing I'm curious about, Kathleen, if you don't mind sharing with us, did you all use a leader facilitator, someone within your organization to facilitate, or did you bring in an outside, what we call an impartial facilitator? And hopefully Kathleen can respond. While I'm waiting maybe on a response, I'll share with you all that depending on the nature of your topic, and this particular topic that is being referenced here, not that all topics aren't serious, but this has some very sensitive concerns. And it would not surprise me for people to want to bring in a an outside facilitator, someone that you contract with, so it's all confidential, but someone that's steeped in the skills and experience of facilitating. Because sometimes in these conversations, they can become heated. Disagreements can rupture. And if not handled professionally and properly, it can sever the opportunity that you are trying to achieve in your meetings. And I'm not saying that folks within the organization can't facilitate. It's a judgment call on your part. A lot of times I facilitate within my own organization or my own meetings, but there have been times before where I have brought in an outside neutral facilitator who everybody agreed on, who was able to come in and handle it in a way that all the parties felt the conversation would be handled facilitated from a neutral standpoint. So just some different ideas. There are different types of facilitators out there, and one is a completely neutral facilitator. But certainly, as I said earlier, there are subject matter expert facilitators, and they can arise from within the organization. And then the leader of the division or department may facilitate the meeting as well.
So Kathleen responded, and she says that we brought in someone well-versed in this area to help with the grant, and she is the facilitator. She is actually now an employee of the university.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it sounds like this person was a subject matter expert in the subject of the work they're doing, came in to do the facilitations, which is one of the strong models of facilitation. And then subsequently, the university brought her in full time. So that's what a great opportunity that is for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And she adds, and the facilitation is sometimes a real challenge, exclamation point, and agrees with you. Yes, exactly. There is another question. Do you recommend reaching out before meetings to see if anyone has agenda items as a way to keep attendees engaged? I could see pros and cons, especially if you don't want to talk about what they request.
Thank you, whoever asked that or suggested it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Juliana.
It's anonymous, that's all.
That's fine. I thank you for putting that out there. As I said early on, I can't cover everything in this, and so you brought a very important point up, which I really appreciate. Yeah, checking with the stakeholders or the meeting members or participants, and making sure that the agenda that they're in agreement on the agenda items before the meeting starts or occurs, and even soliciting what items do we want for the agenda in advance of creating the agenda. So an excellent suggestion. I'm curious, it sounds like a couple of people have already talked about the idea that that they are currently having facilitated conversations around topics of interest to the university setting. Have there been any challenge? And I know someone there mentioned that facilitation can be challenging. Have you all experienced any challenges, specific challenges in the course of having a meeting where a facilitated model wasn't used, or maybe where a facilitated model was used? Okay. One other thing I'll mention while we're talking, I did not include my email address on the PDF, but I certainly want to invite anyone, because sometimes people have thoughts or questions that arise afterwards, or maybe something they didn't want to bring up in the course of the session. So certainly anyone that would like to follow up with me, Juliana and Ashley, you're welcome to share my email address. or Juliana, if you suggest that I put it out or you all put it out, that certainly is an option too, if somebody wanted to follow up.
Sure. I mean, you're welcome to put it in the chat. I think everybody could capture it there. But certainly Ashley, when she follows up with attendees with certificates and all that, she can include your contact information as well.
All right.
And then there's a comment from Kelsey. I think this type of model is common in coalition committees, which I think she's referring to what you were just speaking about.
Okay. At your suggestion, Juliana, I just put my email address, personal email address into the chat box.
Okay.
And then certainly you all can share it with your follow-up as well. So the question was using this in coalition. I think what you're talking about is coalition building. And yes, absolutely. The nature of a structured conversation in a meeting, and that's what facilitation is. We're using a process with structure. It's intentionally designed to fit our needs. And so when we're in the process of creating a collaborative relationship with someone or cooperative relationship, a coalition, the better the communication, the better the outcomes. And for that matter, it's in any meeting. The better the communication, the better the outcomes. And facilitation, or let me say, using skills for facilitating a conversation can lend strength to any meeting and its outcomes. So I certainly think these skills, if not actually using the facilitation model itself, all lend credibility to the work that you're doing in a meeting and will certainly promote cooperation and respect and positive outcomes. That's a good point.
Bob, I want to thank you for presenting on this. I think sometimes, as a professional, and I can only speak for myself, I have attended and conducted lots of meetings, including meeting facilitation, but I sometimes think that I, can get in my own way thinking I know what I know. And I know how I'm doing it and what I want to accomplish. And I think this is a great way to really capture, am I doing the facilitation the right way? Kind of like how you led into today's topic. Am I doing it right? Is it going to be productive? Because ultimately that's what we all want, to be productive. So I think this is this presentation, the information you have put forth is greatly helpful. And two, I think it's okay for us to think that it's also all right to bring in an outside facilitator. Like you said, that could be a great value to the process in general. And I sometimes think, as professionals, we think we have to do it all ourselves and handle it. But I think hearing you say, yes, you can bring in an outside facilitator, and yes, it can be successful, kind of gives us that that professional permission to do so.
You can. It is another option. The one comment I would say is that you want to make sure that all decision makers are in agreement for bringing in someone from the outside, and they're in agreement on who it is. So sometimes getting a list of qualified facilitators in the area or referrals, and then together selecting who it would be makes a real difference. So, yeah.
I agree. So we still have a little bit of time for questions and or comments if anybody would like to share any experiences around facilitation. Kind of like Bob suggested before, how's it been going? How are those community partnerships? How are they working? Do they feel tangible? Do they feel sustainable? I also think, Ashley, while we are wrapping up, if you want to put in the link, the evaluation link and or QR code, that way people have time before they leave to complete it. Anonymous says, I think it is hard inheriting a group that has already been facilitated before you and you have to set a new tone. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. You, depending upon how much you know about the behaviors and the communication that occurred in the previous sessions, you're kind of stepping into an unknown territory. So if someone asked me to step in to a series of meetings that had been previously facilitated by somebody else, I would probably start that facilitation either, I would either meet with the key decision makers in advance of that to kind of find out what went well and what didn't go well. Or in the beginning of that meeting with people, I would want to elicit how can the continuation of this session be different in everybody's best interest, so that I'm avoiding pitfalls that previously occurred and instead building on strengths of what previously occurred.
I feel like that's a situation many of us here have been involved in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the different challenges with facilitation, one of the bigger challenges can be around managing conflict, managing disagreements between people. A lot of times people aren't comfortable, they're conflict avoidant. So expressing a contrary opinion in the midst of a conversation can be challenging. And the gifted facilitator is one who can help the person feel comfortable enough and safe in that environment to be able to express it, knowing that there will not be any kind of reprisal in the course of that conversation. And nobody's respect or reputation has been impugned from putting it out there. And so the skilled facilitator has an ability to elicit information and help people feel comfortable bringing it out. And a lot of times what's being brought out can be a barrier to moving forward in the conversation. And a lot of people are skittish about putting it out there. So it can be challenging, and yet it's something that needs to be addressed if groups are going to be successful in their goals.
I agree. Our agency recently went through some strategic planning with an outside facilitator, and he would call that a straw dog, where you're kind of just pulling out a straw, to put out there to the rest of the team and we need to talk about this. This is what I think is an impediment or that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Aaron says, thanks. This was terrific. You're welcome, Aaron. Thank you. So we have 5 more minutes left. Veronica, yes, great presentation. Thank you for sharing a wealth of very useful information. That's really great to hear, Veronica. So we have 5 minutes for, actually, yeah, 5 minutes left, and we'll just be here in case anybody wants to hang around for questions, comments, that sort of thing. And if you saw in the chat, Ashley did put April's webinar registration link in there. So please feel free to sign up for April's webinar. And we're going to continue the conversation around the community, campus community partnership building.
And if I may, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with the state of Ohio educators around this topic in the university setting. And I wish you all great success in your projects and endeavors.
And Aaron says, and the slides are equally terrific. I'll share with our whole team. We want that. We want knowledge to be shared. Gloria says, thank you.
Very nice.
I'm going to have to snag those slides and share them with my team as well.
Good. I'm glad to hear they'll be helpful.
Yes. Ashley, thank you for your DJ skills again.
That is amazing. And that's going to be my new title. Ashley McCrae, DJ of Prevention Action Alliance. I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome.
That's good.
Well, it looks like people are trickling out. So I think we are all set here because then that means people took the evaluation as well. Bob, thank you so much for coming and presenting today. I do an evaluation summation and kind of let you know how the presentation was received and all that, and just comments from the attendees. And so be on the lookout for that as well. Yeah, but I don't have anything else. We are just so appreciative of you taking the time to present with us today. And I will get that eval summation out to you.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's always good to see the feedback. So thank you for that. Yeah,
of course.
Building on these.
And thank you for this. This is, I think, very applicable, something, tangible a resource that they can see and use. And I think it will be greatly helpful. So it's one of those things that I think professionals sometimes don't always think about, but when it's given to them, they're very appreciative.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. And maybe at first they might not even recognize what parts of it can be useful, but at some point they'll have it as a resource. So
yes,
it's very true.
Yes, I find that to be true too. Sometimes I walk away with the information and the PDF or whatever, and then I go back and look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can use this. So I appreciate how you decided to present this.
Oh, good. Well, this has been kind of fun. You and I have been talking since October, I think.
Yeah. And, I feel like now there could be other opportunities in the future for, additional partnership as we continue our path with the Ohio College Initiative. We just have, like I said, we have a lot of irons in the fire, and you never know as we build relationships with others where some of that information can overlap.
Good. Always glad to help. Glad to help. And I think, on your part, reaching out to, was it John Hopkins?
Yes.
Probably made a big difference for your participants in getting that conceptual idea of what one could look like. So. Yes.
Yeah. In that webinar, some of the feedback was, why are you presenting on this?